back to the Public Announcement Podcast, and today, as many of you might have figured out by the title, we are going to be talking about a topic that, in my opinion, is kind of relevant to the entire climate that we have today. We are going to be talking about diets and sustainability. My main reason why I'm doing this podcast or this episode is that we have to think about that we eat 3 meals a day. And do we really think about what we eat or what we consume, or is it sustainable for the planet as it is? This podcast won't provide you a clear-cut answer on what to exactly eat. I am simply trying to raise questions that you may research or you may think about and try to answer yourself. And I am deeply interested in your opinion, so share your comments and thoughts below on our Instagram or Twitter feeds, and be sure to be involved in a discussion. And another disclaimer before starting this entire thing, I would like to say that I'm not going to focus on nutrients and actually healthy stuff, and if this diet is healthy or that diet is healthy. I don't feel like that's my cup of tea, and I'm not an expert in that field, and I don't feel comfortable talking about these topics, so you will need to research this yourself if that interests you. We have to start paying attention to what we eat, because that is a lot of food consumed daily. I don't think the corporations or anybody wants to really speak about this topic, because first of all, it's a hard topic, and second of all, it doesn't sell well. You can replace these straws and some like bags at supermarkets, even though not everybody does that, and pretend, oh, we're so eco, we're so down with the youth. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really help the situation that much. It just prolongs the problem that is to come. And again, there is no serious discussion, and I would like to raise one. You've got the vegans screaming that, veganism is the best diet and we should all go vegan. You've got then the people who say, my average daily diet is good as it is and I get all the nutrients and I'm healthy. And again, we have no definite answer, and we need one. The farming today, or how the situation looks, is that by 2050 there will be around more or less 10 billion people living on our planet. The FAO, or the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, that's quite a lengthy name, so I will just refer to them as FAO. They warn that we need to increase the production by 70% by that year, 2050, in order to prevent some global malnutrition. And even if we are currently dealing with this, we still have hungry people at our planet at the exact number of 800 million. That is 800 million people who have chronic hunger. They either have very minimal or no food intake at all. And many people say this is because of bad distribution, and you really gotta think about that. Like, is it really of bad distribution? Imagine into our world, these people would come, and suddenly you would have maybe, 400 or 800 million more people to feed. Can you really sustain that? I don't really think so. And many of the techniques that are used today on most of the fields, where you're talking about monocropping or heavy use of fertilizers, they run the risk of making the fields not fertile in the future. So this is another problem we've got to address. Those are the basic questions, and now let's go to the global problematic and what each side has to say. So you probably heard it, that we need to eliminate livestock and become vegans in order to live in a symbiosis with the planet. Even though livestock, by a research done by the FAO, is responsible for 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions, the scientists have agreed that we are not ready to make the jump to eliminate livestock out of our lives. And again, even if vegans have some arguments on their side, and I gotta give it to them, their diet is much more sustainable when we compare it to a traditional Western diet. Veganism is a luxury in most countries. We are talking about people who have both the time and the money to go vegan. And even if we are talking about the people who are in developing countries, right, those people don't even have a choice to become vegan. Those people really just don't have the money and the resources to go vegan, because they are happy with what they have currently at the table. There is no real time to choose like what to eat and and where to buy our thing. And even in the developed countries where we do have the choice, the people don't seem to be much convinced with the idea. We are still eating meat, and we are still, eating everything that we shouldn't be eating based on these researches. So not many people are down for the entire vegan idea. And another problem when I'm talking about the developing countries is that in these countries people use all methods of farming. In the developed countries we usually use more controlled environments. We use something called pink houses, you can research that, or these like vertical farming towers where plants rotate and exchange sunlight or something like that. And these are all like heavily under scientific supervision, but you don't really have that type of things in developing countries. The people still do their farming like they did in 10,000 BC. So that's really a bummer, because then, they do the exact thing I mentioned before. They use fertilizers and do monocropping. That just harms the entire soil. Another argument that I would have against the vegan diets, or generally giving up the animal products, alright? Let's say everybody becomes vegan or vegetarian, or vegan, just vegan. Everybody becomes vegan tomorrow, right? You and me, the entire world. Now, what do we exactly do with the animals that are in the meat industry? Do we just kill them all? Because, people are saying the animals are taking our resources, right? Even the vegans are saying this. I don't quite get them, but whatever. Let's just talk about it. They say they are taking our resources that we could be using for humans, right? Like clean water, like crops. Okay, cool. But once you let these animals run wild, they're gonna do the exact same thing. They are either going to starve to death, which in my opinion is a much worse death than when you would just chop its head off, right? Or they're gonna start eating and drinking our crops and our water, and the problem, I think, is just not gonna be solved. So everybody who is screaming that veganism is the most sustainable diet, it's not. Because you're not using the resources you have, first of all. Second of all, there's no real solution, or at least no real solution proposed, like what to do if everybody becomes vegan. And second of all, the everybody becomes vegan thing is unsustainable in many countries, because the people simply don't have the resources to do so. And even in developed countries, right? Let's say you want to become a vegan. Now you have to, when you shop, you have to start checking each and every fucking label. Do you want to do that? I guess some people have the time to do that, but I honestly have much better things to do than check the labels of each food. Now, you might call me arrogant, but I'm just stating the truth. And you gotta state the truth with yourself. Is that something you've got time for? Checking every label if this is okay and this is not, and if there are some things that I can and cannot eat. I mean, it's time consuming. And even with these entire plant-based diets, and this is not just veganism, because this video seems like I'm attacking veganism. Many of these plant-based diets, they don't really include meat, and then the people are lacking nutrients and they have to supplement them. So again, is the future pill-based? We'll just eat pills and not be hungry or something? Because once you've got a diet where you have to take extra pills in order to sustain that diet, I don't think it's very sustainable, neither on the personal nor on the global level. This just again proves my point. There are just so many diets today. You can pick and choose almost any of them. And there will be at least one or two nutriologists saying this is the best diet, guys. You definitely should pick this one. There even was an idea of an all carnivore diet or an all meat diet. That's complete bullshit, but there was one, right? So people are just eating only meat because somebody said so. I don't know exactly. I couldn't track the source. But there are people who actually genuinely believe in that bullshit, right? But let's imagine, right? Let's imagine for just the sake of an argument that the scientists come up with the perfect diet, okay? Which is far from actually happening, but let's say they do. They write down exactly on the paper what we need to eat, when do we need to eat, and what not to eat, right? Again, can that diet match with our current state of things? When people scream organic farming or we have to get healthier stuff out of organic farms, again, controlled environments are becoming the norm. There is no more of that old farmer John having his own ranch and supplying the local village. That's not sustainable on a global market and not sustainable with the people. Well, simply these farms are gone. You don't have organic foods or anything like that. And many people are saying like, okay, how about we start 3D printing food? I mean, that might work, but in my opinion, it's kind of expensive. So you might return back to those like small local farms. Instead, they won't be growing things, they will be 3D printing them. That is just bullshit to me. Like, that would take a lot of money and resources, in my opinion at least. Not that growing the crops actually doesn't, but this just seems like a very far-fetched idea. Even though I know there have been experiments, I don't know if successful or not. I didn't quite get to the bottom of that. Even if we design the perfect diet, can that diet match the actual situation we have? And on the other hand, if the farmers or somebody says like, this is what we should do in order to feed 10 billion people, is that the healthiest alternative we have? As much as I hate to say it, we cannot satisfy both sides. We have to find a compromise. And this is exactly the point where everybody gets angry. Because the vegan activists, right, they get up and say veganism is the best. You know, the scientists get up and say like, oh wait guys, but it's not like that. We have to still research that. And then like the all carnivore alpha males get up and say, you know, you're not a man if you don't eat meat. And everybody just starts arguing like it always is. And the experts then are just heavily divided. Every nutriologist seems to be saying something else. But when we actually give the work to scientists, there has been a study like this. I'm not saying there has never been a study or nobody's interested in this topic. There has been a study. And that study says that the most sustainable diets are vegetarianism, lacto-vegetarianism, and ovo-lacto-vegetarianism. And now let's talk about these diets on a personal level. Can we as a humankind follow these? Let's say these are the perfect examples of what we should eat. This is how we should eat in order to be the most sustainable and at the end of the day get the most nutrients, right? The exact precise compromise I was talking about. Can we as a united human race all agree that we will eat these? In that exact combination we should? First of all, you're not going to persuade all the people. There are always that group of like, don't tread on me, that think that they should be left alone and make the changes to the world. Yeah, I kind of get where they're coming from, but again, in a global scale, this idea doesn't really work. Another factor is, how will you ensure that the people do the diet correctly? Even when you're talking about diets like veganism, which have been around for quite a while, you still don't have a unified opinion on how to exactly do the vegan diet. You need to consult an expert, and even that expert might tell you things that might not be the best for you because each of us is very individual. So if we were to shift away from our normal diets, how do we know it's not going to end up killing people at the end of the day? You have to ask these questions again because we are talking about applying it on a global level. And that would pretty much be it. That is everything I wanted to say. If you think that this podcast didn't have like a clear-cut conclusion or maybe some like clear-cut structure or goal, I'm saying that yes, it did not have. But these are just some things you have to think about when we are asking the important question of what should we eat daily to be the most sustainable yet not die of malnutrition or not having enough of whatever, right? These are the questions we have to ask ourselves and consider when doing diets. And I just wanted to raise these questions up because you might be laughing now. You might be saying that, oh, this will never happen. Nobody will ever dictate me what I'm saying. Look at the eco-fascists. Look at what they're doing. I think they're pretty strong. And if we don't let the scientists and experts get to the bottom of this, everybody might soon be forced to be vegan, only to realize that it's not really the best alternative we have. So yeah, this is one thing. And the second thing is there are more and more of us every day. And if we don't do a Thanos snap in 10 years time, which is quite impossible, we will have to start dealing with stuff like this on our daily basis. Because the world is becoming less about us as a person and more about us as a global citizen. And every decision we make, we have to think on a global scale. That is what this podcast is supposed to express. You starting to think about what you eat on a global scale. And I encourage every single one of you to ask these questions and think. Think and think. Thank you so much for your attention, and see you in 2 weeks.